What's coming up? Let's not put it that way.
Okay.
What's coming up?
Um, as to what's coming up, we'll be focusing a lot on, as I said, things pertaining to the legal documents that I mentioned concerning land titles, um, muniment of title, holy appanages, um, cognitive trusts, and things of that nature. With regard to the legal document book that I mentioned, the Consecrated Talisman, and why it is in fact documented in many of the governmental archives here in America as well as other countries, and how it should be used, why it should be used. And as I had alluded to earlier with regard to the Piri Reis Bay map, um, of which I know some people have in recent years acquired copies of it, but unfortunately don't really know what to do with it. It's to say, okay, I got this map, which is more evidence of, you know, the Moorish presence, and it was done by this guy Piri Reis Bey, but now how do I, you know, make it, how can I use it in so-called modern time? So anyway, I'm going to talk about that. Things about the society, the Moorish American Society or Society of Maurium, the science behind different things.
May I ask, what role do you see this new president, Obama, play in this, all this?
Well, you know, what's interesting about that is that all may not be what it appears to be. And what I mean by that, on the surface, you know,
And that could be.
right. And on the surface, and when you look at the fact, okay, you know, he's basically been elected president or whatever in their federal political system, and essentially he's going to do whatever they want him to do. But, you know, from another side of it, spiritually, if Spirit says that, well, listen, you're to do this, that, or the other, which may very well be to the benefit of your people, whoever your people might be, then who's to say what will occur? You know what I mean? Who's to say that at some point, while in office, he won't come out and say, well, you know, I'm a Moorish American, and so and so and so and so and so is the case, and I do hereby declare, yada yada yada, contrary to whatever their agenda may be for him. You follow? So it's an open book, really, and it can go anyway.
Then he has to have proof. Then you have to have proof, and that's the information that you already have proof of the Moors that you can speak of later.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Great.
But you know, we'll see what happens. You know, we'll see how it unfolds. So.
Now, all the stuff that I read over the years concerning the Akashic record, and it's revealing the truth and what Dr. York has said and others said. We go back to Reverend Valentine and deception. Are we falling for a deceiver? It is possible that we can be deceived at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's saying about 2012 and
right.
feeling. My major concern right now is what's going to happen right now.
Right.
I don't mean right now, but
right.
it could be 2, 3 years, 5 years.
Right.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I want to say that 12 is coming up. It's coming for
right.
8. Yeah, 8 coming up 9.
Right. Well, that's interesting because then that goes back to something that I had touched on from, as I said, that whole experience in Atlantis when they were doing the experiment with time travel and whatever. and they had chose to conduct the experiment at a time that, again, was not the best time to do that in regard to what was happening with the planet. And I say that because we're approaching that period again when we're talking about the planetary axis shift. When a planetary axis shift occurs, there's a consciousness shift that occurs as well that affects the masses of people one way or another.
Right.
When that happens, as I said, there's a magnetic field collapse. When that occurs, you'll see a lot of things that will happen, as I said, because you're shifting into another dimension. And a lot of people won't make it into the next dimension, largely due, in fact, to their way of thinking. In other words, the line of thinking that people are on in the third dimension in terms of hate, killing, all of these things that are considered to be quote-unquote negative. When you go into like the fourth and fifth dimension, there's really very little space or place for that kind of thinking.
That's very true.
Right, and also during the time of the collapse of the magnetic field, one thing that I did mention, it's very important to mind your thoughts, because actually when that field collapses, you're in what is known as a great void or black void. And as I said, all field of view and vision disappears. So consequently, at that time, more so than any other time, is that whatever it is that you think, which we know that, things are thoughts, thoughts are things, or manifest things. But at that time, more so than any other time, it's critical that you mind your thoughts, because whatever you think at that moment instantaneously will actually appear. In fact, once the actual transition or interface occurs from third to fourth dimension, for those that, for the most part, make it through initially, if they're not careful about whatever it is that they're thinking, they will immediately, instantaneously be snatched out of that dimension and thrown back into a lower dimension. And that's not a pleasant experience. Also, in fact, one of the things that I mentioned about the fact that the third dimension will begin receding and artificial objects and everything will begin to recede or disappear, in addition to which whatever clothing you're wearing will be gone. It will cease to exist. This is one of the things that individuals like Prophet Noble Ali, Akhenaten, the Pharaoh, who I said was an immortal, and Pharaoh, and the reason why he was the first to become Pharaoh and was chosen to be Pharaoh during that time in Kemet, was that he was a representation of what we were to become in the consciousness evolution. In other words, our level of consciousness since the time, since the time of Atlantis, when all of that occurred and all of the events and things that unfolded during the rise and fall of the Moorish Empire, those things were reflective of the number of chromosomes in the body, the 46 chromosomes that we have, which also correspond with the planetary grid around the planet. There's a morphological grid around the planet, as well as the grid that is on the planet or in the planet, the grids that are in the planet. And so when you had the masters like Tehuti, Kikwitek Ali Womalites, and other beings, ascended masters, who were basically trying to reinvigorate the consciousness of Moors that was lost because of the collapse of the magnetic field at that time, what they were doing was that they were performing a kind of planetary acupuncture. In other words, they would actually literally plug into the grids of the planet, and they would, if you will, through breathing techniques, through certain thaumaturgical incantations, etc., they would plug into these grids so as to bring everything back into balance, as well as an attempt to restore the memory of the Moors that was lost, as I said, during that Atlantis period. So This was one of the reasons for the so-called 42 plus 2 books, or what they call the 44 Nefers or gods. And Akhenaten at that time was basically trying to introduce something known as Unamen's consciousness. He was trying to introduce unity consciousness that at that time wasn't even thought about because of the fragmented state of consciousness amongst the Moors. So he, like Prophet Nubuddha Ali and many others, in between that time or before that time, were basically trying to prepare us for this next shift that's about to occur.
Right.
So when he talks about Asiatics need to learn to love instead of hate and all of those things,
All that spirit.
right, he's not saying it from the mundane level that most people in religion tend to
Right.
think of it. He's
Right.
talking about it from a higher consciousness, evolutionary paradigm shift. You follow that?
Yeah.
Many of us lose or have lost. And so that's the whole key behind the morphological grid and the chromosomes and the representation of chromosomes. So the 46 chromosomes, the next level would be 48 chromosomes.
Now, am I mistaken that I was told that when this shift comes that the industrial military complex will completely dissolve?
Right, right. And like I said, nothing artificial will be able to exist. In fact, it's even not even recommended, not even suggested. If you're wise, you won't be in any artificial structure when that happens. You're going to find yourself, say for example, in a park, on a grass, next to a tree, or something that is real and natural. As a matter of fact, this is one of the reasons why many of the stone structures, like the pyramids and stuff like that, are the only things that tend to make it through dimensional shifts. That's why our ancestors had the wherewithal to construct these objects for, like I said, many reasons, and they knew that these things would actually make it through the shift. And this is one of the reasons why when archaeologists, when they do their little dog digging and grave digging and stuff like that, why they can't find but so many items or things from previous civilizations. They'll find a piece here, a piece there, because, like I said, the artificial objects could not make it through the jump. You follow? And so, saying that to say, when I talked about the chromosomes and why it's so important, because they play an integral part or role in the shift in consciousness. And when that happens, say for example, when you go from third dimension to fourth dimension, everything changes. Not only the structures and things around you that become 100 times or 1,000 times more vibrant, but in addition, which hence is why a lot of people are going to be losing their mind because they won't understand what's going on, but in addition to which, your atomic structure changes. This is why I talked about the importance of the language even more so than from the standard grammatical sense of what people deal with. But in terms of the tones, the particular alkaline tone, magnetic tones that correspond with helping the body to resonate at a certain vibratory level and frequency when the magnetic field collapses. So the body has to have a certain level of magnetic resonance on its own. You follow? So this is why in many of these ancient mystery schools, so-called mystery schools, one of the things that they dealt with was teaching the students on how to tap into these tones and frequencies so as to feed the melanin, you follow, and raise the vibration of the melanin and raise the consciousness so that you can meet the level of the shift or the dimensional shift, you follow, and so that you won't be left out when the shift comes. And so this is very key, and that's why I talked about silicon with carbon-based beings, but silicon, which is also known as the great magnet, which you'll find like it's important to eat silicon-based foods, like.
When you say silicon-based food, explain it to me.
For example, like.
I know what silicon ain't number saying.
Right, but what I'm saying is, interestingly enough, it's a unique atom in its structure similar to that of carbon. Carbon and
Right,
silicon
right.
are the most unique atoms,
Right.
or elements rather, on the periodic table of elements. And many of your foods like beets, pomegranates, apples, etc., greens, are high in silicon.
Now, you know I'm in a tribe in
Right.
Africa. Okay, now my mentors, they're dead now.
Right.
But as they were teaching me in my tribe, I would sit among the masters.
Right.
And, the old man used to always give me charcoal,
Right.
pure charcoal. He would always take it and beat it up and give it to me and tell me to take it all the time.
Right.
And I still take my charcoal all the time. And that's the primary element
Right.
of the earth.
Right. Right.
And that are very powerful.
Exactly.
I try to tell people always include in your menu some dirt.
Right.
Some
Exactly.
charcoal.
Right, and it's very interesting that you say that, because in this so-called society and culture, they, make the joke about it, eat dirt and die, like it's a bad thing. And, that is so far from the truth. I mean, it's not even funny. But that's a very good point that you made about the charcoal. But yeah, so at any rate, this is part of the reason why the consecrated talisman legal document that I talked about, that is in harmony with many of the ancient legal documents via these structures, etc. As I said, many of the pyramids, the Born Stone of Kumasakumkanit, and other structures and things. In fact, what's interesting about that particular Born Stone, if you read it, it's actually inscribed in ancient Moabite. Hanno Bey, who was a Suffet, he was a magistrate of ancient Carthage, and it was Hanno Bey that actually inscribed on the Born Stone the annexation, the whole thing concerning the annexation of the Americas to the Iberian Peninsula, and essentially conveying the lands to his progeny and those of his line. It's just phenomenal. But anyway, like I was saying, that this is one of the reasons why I did the consecrated talisman, because it deals specifically with these ancient documents. One of my assignments, apart from introducing or reintroducing, as it were, because there's nothing new under the sun, the ancient language, in particular the Moorish Latin and other ancient languages, is actually restoring many of the ancient archives, and putting back into not only the archives on a planetary Earth level, but when you are dealing with restoring those ancient archives, you're also restoring or putting back into the morphologic field of the planet and the consciousness of the planet this information. You follow? So that way it is actually, how can I say, it is then put back into the consciousness or the memory of man, or in this case, in the memory of the Moors, this information. Hence is why, like I said, I've been putting it back into the Royal Archives in Spain, and the Vatican, and the Department of State Library, and other places like that, and the genealogical records in the Library of Congress. Thus is why, are you guys ready for the close-ups? But I guess we'll get to that. But anyway, that's why I did a document concerning my family genealogical record, or family tree, as it were.
Now, the Moors and the Catholic Church, last week there was something on the radio I was listening to. The Pope had a meeting with some Moors.
With Obama.
Okay.
Did a meeting with Obama wearing some $7,000 red shoes. and came over here.
I don't know about it. Obama who?
Obama.
The president?
What about
Yeah, yeah, the Pope.
Oh, he met with the Pope?
He met with the Pope.
Right.
The Pope came here to meet him, supposed to bow down to his feet, wore some $7,000 red slippers.
Obama did?
No, the Pope wore that just to come see
yeah.
Obama.
Oh, well, you know what's interesting about you said the red slippers.
That's right.
What's interesting about that is in ancient times, the ancient Moors, in ancient Maur, which later became Rome, but in ancient Maur, in the government, what they did, which later became known as the Senate and stuff like that, but they wore red shoes, which basically denoted a certain rank in the government structure. And these red shoes were called galkei mulii. And so this was one of the reasons why they wore these red shoes. So it's no surprise or very interesting that you mentioned something about the Pope wearing the shoes and bowing
Right.
to the Asiatic.
Right.
You know, basically, I guess letting him know who he really is, whether Obama's aware of it or not.
Yeah, because Bobby Hemmett was in Cleveland, maybe 3 weeks ago, and
Right.
he showed a picture of the Pope with the shoes
Right.
and everything, and he also showed the whatever they call it, that had the Moor head
Right.
on his shield, or whatever,
Right, right,
as
right.
well.
Right.
So this is this is the first I ever heard that the Vatican of Rome was called, named after our ancestry when we controlled it.
Right.
See,
Right.
man, this history is awesome, brother. You did some research.
Right. And so anyway, that's why I was saying that the geodetic survey document is, as I said, it's a global survey and outlining the metes and bounds of the empire, the dominion, which actually, as I said, is to be used in conjunction with Libretto 7.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so you have Libretto 2 and Libretto 7 are to be used in conjunction with the Piri-Reis Bay map. This, along with the Codicis Incantumentum. The Codicis Incantumentum
Not familiar.
is, oh, this is a manual of spells. Right. Right, the manual of spells is a part of the consecrated talisman, and these particular books, along with the holy appanage and muniment of title, is all dealing with the issue of land title, the Moorish land title, and as I said earlier, irrefutable evidence concerning who in fact the land belongs to, the birthright inheritance of the Moors in America and throughout the world. And in fact, as I said earlier, you can go to the Department of State Library in Washington, and you can look it up. It's actually listed under 2 languages, bilingual, of course, in the Moorish Latin and also in the English. And you'll see the whole description of the land.
Now, I was told, I'm going to tell you something. I'm not no spring chicken.
Right.
You know, I'm a little up in age.
Right.
But I was told when I went to federal prison and I was nosed as hell and just going through shit, I was like enthused about being more
Right.
learning all what I was learning.
Right.
I was told by some older guys in federal prison to not get my information from where I was getting it from.
Okay.
The direction I was headed.
Right.
And they told me, this is years ago, that do not get anything from the Library of Congress.
Right.
That's what they told me.
Mhm.
They said because everything coming out the Library of Congress is being watched and
Right.
monitored.
Right.
And that if I keep and insisting on getting information from the Library of Congress. They'll put my behind on to watch this.
Right. Well, you know, what's interesting about that, were you finished your point about that?
And that by doing that, I would be watched from
Right.
that point
Right.
forward.
Right.
So they told me to hold off, and they would channel the information to me rather than for me to go to the Library of Congress and keep asking for this and for that, for
Right.
this book and that book.
Right.
Because they would monitor my movement.
Right. Well, you know, it's not to say that that won't occur with anybody asking for specific things.
I'm just telling you.
Right, or looking for specific things. But the thing with that is, and I understand the part about information being channeled, because what's intriguing about that is when I talked about earlier about the Akashic records,
Right.
you know, a lot of the information I've accessed is from the Akashic records or Askaic logometers or lifelines, because, well, that's a whole nother subject about the lifelines of the Akashic records. But the point is, as I said earlier, the reason why I did that is because it was to a means of completion in restoring the records or restoring that whole process. In other words, as I said earlier, in putting this information back into these records, these archives, it's also going back into the planetary morphic grid, you follow, and therefore going into the consciousness of the people, you follow. So that's why it's imperative that I had to do this in putting the stuff back into the Department of State, the National Archives, the various sections of the Library of Congress. Now, what's interesting about that is, yes, you may be on a watch list for those that choose to go, but as with any, but
I wanted the information.
Right.
I didn't care.
right, but as with anything, it's really all in how you conduct yourself, how you carry yourself, what to say, what not to say, when you are looking for this information, whatever information it might be. As I had mentioned a few weeks ago on the radio, I think you had caught part of the show,
Right.
and I said that one of the reasons why a lot of people are unable to find things in the Library of Congress, for those that do go, is primarily because they don't know what to ask for. And if they do know what to ask for, they don't know how to ask for it, because the European, as you know, his thing is all about codes.
That's right.
You follow?
Sure.
And if he's not using codes in, say, for example, United States code book or whatever, code this, that, and the other, 11258, this, that, he uses codes in languages, and usually languages that many of us don't speak.
Right.
All right? I know this, for example, like, and then I'll draw a parallel with the national anthem of Mauritius. The national anthem of our country, Mauritius, is, which, by the way, Mauritius, all of this stuff as well, I didn't mention, is also documented in Homeland Security and U.S. Customs and Border Protection as well, including our passport. But Mauritius is also registered as a country or foreign country of manufacture as well, and recognized as a foreign country. You see right here, it says countries of manufacture, genuine copies of phonorecords, and protected work, United States and Mauritius. But at any rate, sort of lost train of thought. But I was saying that in our national anthem, one of these particular so-called passwords that they use in the Library of Congress is in our national anthem, right? So it's interesting that most of those passwords, if you want to call it that, are Moorish Latin words that that can only be used to access these particular areas of the Library of Congress, and then in addition to which, it's usually information predating 1492. Right. So most of the stuff that we look for is usually 1492 on up to the present.
Right.
So if we're talking about 1492 to whenever, because rest assured, most anything that is in any other library in the world is in the Library of Congress. You know what I'm saying? Even though I'm not saying that, you know, that's the be-all, end-all, but I'm just saying if you know where to look and how to look and what to ask for, and how to ask for it, chances are, 10 chances to 1, you'll get it. Much like Prophet Noble Ali said, what? He said, go to those who know law and ask them in a what? Intelligent tone, and they will render you a favorable reply. So when he says ask them in an intelligent tone, he's not necessarily saying, okay, well, you know, this is an articulate guy, you know, and he sounds like any other European or whatever. He had a good miseducation, and he's, you know what I mean? So it's not even about that. Most of the time it's about the right word, and just one word. You see, so that's what I found to be very interesting. In fact, I'll say this much. One of those words, which I mentioned earlier, it's in our national anthem, which is the first or second word in that anthem, is incunabla. We say incunabla populi rosium es locorum qua cantare, amor diligere, which basically, the incunabla is saying birthplace or origin of a noble or royal and genteel people. But that particular word is one of the words that's used in the Library of Congress, and there's a section in there that is called incunabla. And as I said, everything in there is predating 1500, 1492. You follow? So, and it's not just there, it's many other places. Right. In fact, the archives of the Medina Sidonia family in Spain, Cadiz, Spain, which before it became Cadiz, in ancient time it was known as Gades. During the time of Carthage, or even before Carthage, during the Gadamantes, when the Moors were known as Gadamantes. But anyway, in the archives of the Medina Sidonia family, you have most of their records are like 900 Christian era, 1000, 1100. Very few documents or books or whatever that's in that particular archive is, you know, modern era, modern time, you know. And such is the case with most of the libraries around the world. You know, whether it's the Vatican, you know, whether it's library, because most of these museums in Europe, they have libraries as well as laboratories underground.
Now, can I ask you a question? Because, you know, I was a big fan of Dr. York.
Right. You and I both.
During this time. And, it's like right now, at first when he got arrested, and I hear a lot of the stuff that was said about him was not true.
Right.
And that, what's going on?
What I found out was when I was just in Atlanta, I was in Vegas. When I was just in Vegas, back in June, I met the young man that studied with York, a young guy that studied York's writings.
Right.
And he wrote an article. He said also that the young lady that the government used to tell the lie about him raping or molesting her, what have you, she was told and came out, even though she's grown now, how she was forced, and the family was threatened to be tortured or whatever, you know, that the family was involved, everybody, to make this happen, to shut him down.
Wow.
Because his movement was moving too strong.
Right,
to
exactly.
educate and bring the light,
Right,
to bring truth, our kit to our cultural people
right, right,
of Asiatics.
right,
And this brother says that he, that they won't let him out even though the woman has come forth and whatnot. They're not letting him out. They fear him,
right,
And with that saying, the FBI doing what they're doing and so forth, the question to me is, I was telling someone that the FBI is a religious organization, and I think I have followed some information from Brother Israel,
right,
and that they were set up in Delaware, and they're something under church organization carrying guns.
right, right.
But if that's the case under church organization, and we claiming Christianity, and there are people claiming in this whole thing to Christ, this, that, and the other, in Christianity, and then you have the FBI, this, that, and the other, why is it people are still asleep and docile? They will not accept that there's something wrong here with this picture of understanding what's the truth is. Because people think that America was built on Christianity.
Right.
And those are the other things that probably that you may need to speak on how this whole landmass somewhat was built, and the trueness of that date that you mentioned earlier of when Christianity came into the fold.
Right.
And when it came into the fold, that's when they gave us slavery.
Right.
And they made us study one book, which was their so-called Bible.
Right.
And that's a shame that it's like that.
Right. Well, that's interesting. Because even though on one hand, see, we have to, I guess what we don't have to, but what we should look at is, when we say, well, this country wasn't founded on or founded upon Christianity, what do we mean when we say this country? You know what I'm saying? Are you talking about from Georgie Boy's time, 1789, 1791, to the present federal political Christian system? Or are you talking about prior to that time? You follow? And then when you say country, are you saying country in the context of corporation? Are you saying country in the context of kingdom? Are you saying country in the context of kingdom, being a part of the dominion or empire? You follow? So there are a series of dynamics here that are going on that must be considered when we talk about, well, it wasn't founded upon this or it wasn't founded upon that. At what time period are we talking about? You follow? And who are we talking about, and what group of people are we talking about?
I think what I'm trying to, that is pretty much broad, as you just stated.
Right.
So one of the things I think will be important is whatever is more pertinent or whatever it is for people to try to catch this here, understanding of who they are, because they do not know thyself. So by the thing that's been constantly put upon thy face, or in thy face, is the cross.
Right.
Jesus Christ, and not understanding that J, instead of 6 letters that wasn't even in the alphabet, and J wasn't even in there.
Right.
This whole thing that they can research and find the trickery behind these so-called dictionaries.
Right.
The every time of somebody bringing you this dick part ain't going to condition you to understand something.
Right.
With this etymology trickery.
Right. Well, that's why I said when you deal with etymology, because obviously we're talking about a language issue here, and when you're dealing with etymology, which is good when you tracing a word back to its root or origin, Chinese, German, whatever it is, but unfortunately it has its limits. In other words, you reach a wall and you can't really go much further if in fact the language that you speak, or what is considered to be your language that you speak, as opposed to a word that you're researching that may trace its origins back to another language that you may not speak, then again, there's a barrier. You follow? So in order to have a better or even overall comprehension of the word that you're researching in whatever language or origin that it's in or of, is to better understand or comprehend that language in terms of knowing, as I said earlier, the mathematics of that language, the helixography of that language, the DNA and the RNA of that language. And when I say that, I'm talking about understanding it from a spiritual sense, the language, and understanding it from, of course, its contextual use and or sense, And once you understand the mathematics behind it, or the mathematics involved, then you cannot be brumagemmed or gerrymandered or hoodwinked concerning the technology used in the language that you pointed out. So now, of course, a lot of people will say, okay, well, so are you saying that, well, damn, I got to learn German, this, that, and the other, and all these other languages, not to mention the one I'm speaking? See, the problem with that is the European enchanted phantom, spook without spark, whatever you want to call them. A part of miseducation is that, much like many people have become, when they talk about fractions or certain types of math, and they get intimidated or they start to shake or whatever.
Right.
The same holds true with language. When you talk to most people about language, they make it sound like it's some Herculean task. It's very simple. Once you understand the mathematics, meaning the grammar, the casing, the stems, the root, and the conjugation, you know the language. You follow? And once you understand the conjugation, that means you understand how to, more importantly, how to alter and change realities, how to conjure, how to thaumaturgically or magically conjure things. Hence is what we did and have been doing, and thus is one of the reasons why you see on many of these movies, television shows, whatever, Supernatural, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I can go on, where you have these porks attempting to, via these movies, call upon things, spirits and whatever else, or tap into the spiritual realm using what? Ancient languages or tones that they have not the atomic structure or chemical composition to invoke in the way in which they want to. Hence is why, as I said earlier, these things mimic the pattern of melanin. You follow? In those beings or individuals who are heavily melanin concentrated. So that's why I always and have and continue to stress the importance of understanding language from its genetic standpoint, from its mathematical standpoint or viewpoint. And in so doing, you can then become the ultimate thaumaturgist. And that's actually a part of the science of, I mentioned it earlier, the science of, this is Libretto 9, Libretto 9 of the Consecrated Talisman, the dialectic treatise of a Moorish American religion. Now, a lot of people get thrown by the term of the use religion, talismanism, but I'm talking about the science, much of which I talked about earlier with Atlantis and all of this, and the various sciences and things that we at one time mastered, but this goes back into the light languages and understanding the light languages from the tonal, vibrational, frequency, wavelength, because when you talk about wavelengths, you're talking about separation of dimensions. When you understand it from this point of view, then you can begin to conjure and manipulate whatever it is that you want, whatever kind of reality, like Neo did in the Matrix, and get instantaneous results faster or quicker than you would using the acidic electrical vibrational tones that the European has you using in his dialect, and thus is able to play the games that he's been playing via the so-called language. You follow? So, like I said, nothing wrong with English per se, because we were the architects of English, of German, German, French, Chinese, all of these languages. But the problem is that we got lost in the dialects. You follow? When we lost ourselves, lost our minds, and lost everything else. But now we're coming back into who we are. And so basically it's time to just basically put the pieces back together, and there it is. So, yes.
Go ahead, ask that question.
Go ahead.
So the people know, which we know is in your holy talisman, they need to know the breakdown of the word Akmirium.
Right. Now the breakdown about Maurium basically is very simply is love's neutral place, which is basically dealing with light, light frequencies, sound, again language, but essentially it's love's neutral place, meaning that it's dealing with much of what we talked about with the dimensional shifts, etc., in preparing our minds, our essence, our spirit for the shift. And that's what Maorium is about, from the mundane to the monumental. You follow? From the physical to the spiritual. And so when we talk about love's neutral place, we're talking about Samhita ad Maorium. Samhita ad Maorium means path to ad Maorium. What is the path to ad Maorium? The path to ad Maorium is the path to unity. The path to unity is what? Path to unity is forgetting the self. And I know that sounds weird when I say forgetting the self. When you forget the self in the context of unity consciousness, which is what Akhenaten and others and Prophet Wajir Ali was trying to introduce when he talked about unity, he was saying it in the context of universal and a united thinking in terms of the collective. Matter of fact, you may remember Star Trek, The Next Generation, and all of that when he talked about the Borg. And the Borg's whole thing was about the collective. You follow? And they were, of course, always seen as the bad guy. But in actuality, they were representing something dealing with higher levels of unity consciousness, which basically is dealing with a state of enlightenment known as paripasu. Paripasu basically is a state of enlightenment which is neutral. You follow? And so that's part of what Atmaurium is too, when at the end of the word Atmaurium, is neutral, basically representing neuter, male and female, however neither. So that's why rather than Allah, for example, for those from the religious aspect, rather than Allah, the so-called masculine aspect in the Arabic, and Alat, the feminine aspect in the Arabic, we say Alut in the Moorish Latin because it encompasses male and female. Or even as Brother Asir often says, the creator and the creatrix, or creator, creatrix, or creatricis. And so therefore you have the union and the unity thinking and the unity mind meld, etc. So we basically, what we're trying to do is to get ourselves back to unity consciousness, unity awareness. You follow? So I hope I've answered your question.
Okay. You keep speaking about the talisman. Just grab the original talisman so that I can hold it up, and then we want to let them know that it's been broken down into segments for the audience.
Right.
So that they'll know that.
Right. Now this is the, you see the cover here, and so there's no writing on the front, but on the inside there is. But the consecrated talisman of the Moorish American Society of Comprehensive Science, or the Moorish Society of Maorium, which right here are the first 8 books. It's actually currently 19 books, which some of which I've showed you earlier have been broken down into pamphlet form, 19 in all, and it's a total of about 1,000 pages or so. And it covers everything from, as I said, cognitive trusts, land titles, to thaumaturgy, which basically is dealing with high magic. It's dealing with incantations. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I failed to mention in terms of incantations, ancestral incantations, which is also a hereditary legal formula. A hereditary legal formula is, for example, and something we've gotten away from, is national anthems. A national anthem is, for example, anthem means carminis. Carminis means song. And so songs are essentially chants or national anthems where you are invoking the spirit or the essence of the ancestors, calling upon those predecessors from other dimensions, other realms, etc. So this is also what it deals with. It also deals with health, with herbology. It also goes into so-called medicine, so Western medicine from that side of it as well. So you can know the difference between that which is natural as opposed to that, and when I say magnetic, as opposed to that which is electrical or acidic. The talisman also deals with, economics, Moorish economics. As a matter of fact, here's one of the books dealing specifically with Moorish economics, which on the face of it you can see the Filleti or the money of Maorium, which I can show you in a second. You can see close up or closer as to what the money of Al-Maryam looks like. And also the talisman, Libretto 15, that was the economics. Moorish economics is Libretto 16. Libretto 15 is something of which I thought was necessary and much needed for the Moors, specifically dealing with the whole jurisdiction issue. We've been having a lot of problems with the jurisdictional issue, and not to say that any of what the Moors have been doing over the years is wrong. It's just that, you know, you're dealing with a beast and, you know, he doesn't respect or honor anything. But one of the other working tools here, dealing with the treaty, of which is something that Moors, unfortunately, when dealing with the jurisdiction issue, 9 times out of 10 do not present the treaty, or they do not present it in a legal fashion or a lawful fashion. In fact, I have here a
Kind of original document, government seal.
Right, I have a certified copy from the National Archives of the Moorish Treaty in both the English and the Arabic. And in addition to that, I have what I constructed is a legal guide on how to actually use the treaty. Okay? In fact, on the inside page of the front cover, I have a letter here from Homeland Security recognizing the Talismanic Kingdom of Al-Maryam, as well as the money of Al-Maryam. Not that we need their recognition, but just for posterity's sake, as it were. But this legal guide basically deals with each article, the breakdown of each article, what those articles are about, and I'm even going into it from the translation and transliteral aspect of it, even using many of their own translators, so-called authorities, on the breakdown of the treaty, and how in the treaty, even if you want to say that the treaty was made between the Moors and the so-called federal Christian government, even though in actuality it was made between 2 groups of Moors, but even if you wanted to say that it was made between the Moors and Christians, well, according to their own translator, the translator breaks down that when they say our Lord, they're talking about the Sultan. When the so-called Christians say our Lord, they're talking about the Sultan of Marrakesh or the Sultan of Morocco. So what is that saying? It's saying that they were and still are vassals, and hence is one of the reasons why they had to pay the tributes, the yearly tributes, 40,000, 20,000, 100,000, whatever, in gold. As a matter of fact, I refer you to another certified document, of which I'm going to give the brother Israel. Right. Another certified document, which is from the Congressional Record, 3rd Congress, 1st Session, December 16, 1791, talks all about the tributes that they had to pay the Sultan of Morocco as well as his son for the use of the dominions, and how George Washington tried to hide this fact in the Congressional Records. Right. Concerning the use of the dominions. But at any rate, yeah, how George Washington tried to hide the fact in the records of how they had to pay these annual tributes, as I said, in 20,000, 25,000, 50,000, etc., which would be the equivalent of, you know, millions of dollars today by the so-called inflationary standard.
And the way to get in contact with you, because you have some elderly that do not have a computer.
30 seconds.
Right.
So do you have a phone number
Right.
that you can get in contact? Because you have some people that don't have no website
Right. We can be
or a computer.
We can be contacted at area code 216-283-5529, the Moorish American Society. Also 716-283-2807. All right, so for those of you who don't have computers or any of the technological gadgets.
And this has been?
This has been brought to you by Talismanic Kingdom of Al-Maryam, the Moorish American Society of Comprehensive Science, and I am the magnificent Prince Uriel Bey.
Excellent. Excellent.
Right. Now that may